What if a victory could feel more like defeat? What if the cost of winning was so high that success itself became almost meaningless? What if history remembered a commander not for conquering his enemy, but for paying such a terrible price that his triumph became a cautionary tale for all time? This is the story of Pyrrhus of Epirus, a warrior king whose brilliance on the battlefield was matched only by the tragic cost of his victories and the brutal war that would give birth to the phrase we still use today. A Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhic. Name Pyrrhus has echoed through centuries, not just as a figure of ancient history, but as a symbol of ambition, human cost, strategy gone too far, and the haunting truth that not all victories are worth winning. Thousands of years later, his name still raises questions we struggle with today. What truly defines success? Is it the conquered ground, the enemy broken, or the price paid in blood and lives? How do we measure achievement when it comes at the cost of those we lead, the people we care for, and the very fabric of our society? Pyrrhus did not merely wage war, he lived it. From his earliest days, he was surrounded by conflict, forged in a world where kings were shaped by the battlefield. Born in 319 BCE into the royal house of Epirus in northwestern Greece, Pyrrhus was celebrated for his lineage and trained from youth in the arts of war. In a time when reputation was as valuable as gold, Pyrrhus was schooled by masters of strategy and combat. He grew not only as a warrior, but as a leader, known for his courage, tactical brilliance, and an almost obsessive pursuit of military excellence. Reached adulthood, he had already seen countless skirmishes and conflicts. He learned that war was not simply about brute force, but psychology, terrain, timing, and the ability to seize fleeting opportunities. He saw the power of shock and awe, and he understood that a commander's reputation could inspire fear or confidence long before men ever raised their swords. That understanding would make him one of the most dangerous opponents of his age. Yet Pyrrhus was not merely a soldier. He was a man driven by something deeper, a vision of greatness, a desire to inscribe his name among the immortal figures of history. He carried within him the fire of Achilles, the legendary warrior of Homeric lore, and he believed that through battle, glory could be made eternal. Pyrrhus's chance to seize a legacy came from a land far from his own, the Italian peninsula, where a young power was rising. Rome, once a small city-state, was rapidly conquering the tribes and cities of Italy. Its disciplined legions and relentless expansion alarmed neighbors across the region. Among those uneasy observers was the Greek city of Tarentum, located in southern Italy. Tarentum's leaders feared Rome's growing influence and sought an ally who could challenge Rome's military might. In 280 BCE, they turned to Pyrrhus and invited him to intervene. For Tarentum, he was a potential liberator. For Pyrrhus, it was an irresistible opportunity, a chance to challenge the might of Rome, to win not just battles but renown, and to secure a place in history. He gathered a coalition of troops that included seasoned Greek hoplites, cavalry units, and most remarkably, war elephants, beasts that struck terror into the hearts of those who had never seen them before. The journey to Italy was not simply a military expedition. It was a dramatic crossing of the Adriatic Sea, a march into the unknown, and a gamble on destiny itself. When Pyrrhus's army arrived, the Italian landscape was changing. Ancient Greek colonies dotted the southern coasts, and Roman power continued to spread. The stage was set for a confrontation not just between armies, but between two very different worlds. One of the most unforgettable elements of Pyrrhus's campaign was his use of war elephants. These towering creatures trained for battle were like living fortresses on the field, with iron-tipped tusks and armored howdahs carrying archers and javelin men. The elephants were shock troops unlike anything the Romans had seen. Imagine the ground shaking under massive feet, dust and steam rising as they charged, their size dwarfing everything around them. a visceral force that seemed more myth than reality. The elephants had a profound psychological effect on Roman soldiers. The disciplined Roman legions, trained to fight infantry and cavalry, were bewildered by these colossal creatures. Spears and swords felt insignificant against them, and many Roman troops faltered under the thunderous charge. In the Battle of Heraclea in 280 BCE, Pyrrhus's elephants disrupted Roman formations, threw their disciplined ranks into chaos, and delivered a decisive tactical advantage. On the battlefield, Pyrrhus achieved victory, but the triumph was not without consequence. Shortly afterward, Pyrrhus met Roman forces again at Asculum. Once more, the battlefield was consumed by smoke, thunder, and relentless combat. Once more, Pyrrhus claimed victory, and once more the cost was staggering. Scores of his best soldiers fell, his forces were depleted, and the manpower he brought across the sea was slowly being worn thin. It was after this battle that Pyrrhus reportedly made a remark that would echo through time. "If we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined." These words marked the birth of a concept that would become deeply embedded in military and cultural vocabulary: the Pyrrhic victory, a victory won at such devastating cost that it is essentially equivalent to defeat. This was not just a loss of men. It was a diminution of force, morale, and strategic capacity. For all the brilliance Pyrrhus displayed, for all the tactical triumphs he achieved, his army was bleeding out faster than it could be replenished. As the war continued, the limitations of Pyrrhus's campaign became increasingly clear. Rome was, not like the small city-states of Greece or the fragmented tribes of the Eastern Mediterranean. Rome was a republic with a vast and growing citizen population and a seemingly infinite supply of soldiers willing to fight, die, and be replaced. While Pyrrhus fought with an elite corps of seasoned warriors, the Romans fielded wave after wave of fresh legions. The logistical and demographic advantages of Rome were now plain to see. Pyrrhus still won battles, but Roman resilience meant that victories did not translate into strategic success. His army became a shell of its former self, strained by continuous combat and the harsh realities of supply and reinforcement. Yet Pyrrhus remained a formidable commander, respected by friends and feared by enemies. His courage was unquestioned, his tactics innovative, but the war demanded more than sheer bravery. Eventually, Pyrrhus shifted his focus to Sicily, hoping to unite the Greek cities there and create a strong base of support. He believed that securing Sicily would bolster his resources and tip the balance in his favor, but Sicily proved resistant. The Greek cities remained divided, and instead of finding allies, Pyrrhus encountered resistance, political strife, and growing discontent among his own troops. The Sicilian campaign strained his already depleted forces and widened the gulf between expectation and reality. Pyrrhus's dream of building an enduring dominion was slipping away. In the end, the campaign against Rome and his troubles in Sicily forced him to return eastward. His ambitions of carving out a legacy in Italy had faltered, not because he lacked battlefield skill, but because the cost of victory had become unbearable. Rome, by contrast, continued to grow. The relative strategic success of the Romans against a commander as capable as Pyrrhus was one of the earliest signs of their rising dominance across the Mediterranean. Rome's ability to absorb losses, adapt tactics, and replenish its legions marked the beginning of its transformation from a regional power into a world empire. The legacy of Pyrrhus, however, was not merely military. He became a symbol, the embodiment of a brilliant general whose victories were outpaced by their human and material cost. Generals, leaders, scholars, and statesmen would later invoke his name whenever triumph came at too steep a price. The Pyrrhic War also provides a timeless lesson about the nature of conflict itself. True victory cannot be measured only by the number of enemies routed or territory gained. A victory that leaves a force so weakened that it cannot continue, or that destroys the very foundation it seeks to protect, is hollow. and in many ways defeats the purpose of fighting in the first place. This lesson resonates far beyond ancient battlefields, extending into politics, business, personal ambition, and the difficult decisions societies face whenever they choose between risk, reward, and the value of human life. There is an emotional and human element to Pyrrhus's story that makes it so deeply compelling. He was not a faceless conqueror, but a person, driven by conviction, shaped by struggle, and ultimately reminded by history that greatness always demands sacrifice. Yet, Pyrrhus's sacrifice was not merely his own. It was paid for by the soldiers who followed him, by the families who lost sons and fathers, and by the cities caught in the crossfire of a war that reshaped their world. The term Pyrrhic victory survives because it captures something universal about the human condition: the bitter irony of winning something only to realize the cost was too high. In modern times, analysts use the term to describe military engagements, political battles, corporate mergers, and any situation where success is overshadowed by losses that outweigh the benefits. It serves as a cautionary flag. Be careful what you wish for, because achieving it might demand a price you cannot afford. The story of Pyrrhus also challenges us to question our assumptions about power. It asks whether the size of an army, the brilliance of a battle plan, or the fierceness of a charge truly defines strength, or whether the capacity to endure, to outlast, and to adapt under pressure is the truer measure of a force's might. The Romans, in their resilience, proved themselves equal to any challenge, a lesson they would carry into centuries of conflict and empire building. Though Pyrrhus returned east without conquering Rome, his legacy did not diminish. Greece and Epirus remembered him as a great leader, a brilliant tactician, and a man who fought not for mere conquest, but for something deeper: a belief in honor, valor, and a place among the pantheon of legendary figures. The world today continues to grapple with wars, conflicts, and struggles where the human cost often outstrips the gains made. In every instance where we see families displaced, cities destroyed, and young lives cut short for ambiguous or costly political objectives, the story of Pyrrhus echoes through time. It serves as both a history lesson and a philosophical mirror, asking us to consider not just what we are fighting for, but whether the victory will be worth the cost. Perhaps the true lesson of Pyrrhus is that history does not merely judge leaders by the battles they win, but by the legacy they leave. The name Pyrrhus lives on not because he conquered Rome, he did not, but because his story forces us to reckon with the true cost of human ambition and the painful price of triumph. And so, when we hear the phrase Pyrrhic victory, let us remember more than just a definition. Let us see the faces of those who fought, the land ravaged by war, the leader whose brilliance became his burden, and the hard truth that success, when too dearly bought, may transform victory into tragedy. That is the enduring legacy of Pyrrhus, of Epirus, a warrior king, a brilliant strategist, and a name that bears witness to the fact that victory is not always victory. And sometimes the greatest lesson in war is understanding when not to fight at all.